Maiden with the flaxen hair. Is this the one I'm thinking of? It is Maiden and Sulky. Oh. Whatever. Soundtrack. Rosacea, Maiden with that in. Nah, it's too known. Oh, very quiet as well. No, stop. These are all very epic. I'm trying to think of what I can play, which is not super epic, but I can. There's something in the background. Hello, I'm going to do something special, but I have to find good background music, which is not going to be too distracting. Satin distracting. Why not? Ah, it's a surprise. All right, I'll leave it as this, and then if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. Let me change the stream title. You're just in time, actually. Something silly. It's silly and it's spooky to some people. I like it, but it's spooky to some people. Making an OS? Oh god, no. Even more approachable and understandable. Maybe. Yeah, it's a clue. Huh? Ready? Steady. Actually, let me put this on the screen so I can see. The naming of cats. The naming of cats is a difficult matter. It isn't just one of your holiday games. You may think at first I'm mad as a hatter when I tell you a cat must have 3 different names. First of all, there's the name that the family use daily, such as Peter, Augustus, Alonzo, or James, such as Victor or Jonathan, George or Bill Bailey, all of them sensible, everyday names. There are fancier names if you think they sound sweeter, some for the gentlemen, some for the dames, such as Plato, Admetus, Electra, Demeter, but all of them sensible, everyday names. But I tell you, a cat needs a name that is particular, a name that is peculiar and more dignified. Else how can he keep up his tail perpendicular, or spread out his whiskers, or cherish his pride? Of names of this kind I can give you a quorum, such as Muggerstrap, Coxo, or Coricopat, such as Bombalurina, or else Jolilorum, names that never belong to more than one cat. Above and beyond there's still one name left over, and that is the name that you will never guess. The name that no human research can discover, but the cat himself knows and will never confess. When you notice a cat in profound meditation, the reason, I tell you, is always the same. His mind is engaged in rapt contemplation of the thought, of the thought, of the thought, of his name. His ineffable, effable, effable, deep and inscrutable singular name. The old Gumby cat. I have a Gumby cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. Her coat is of the tabby kind with tiger stripes and leopard spots. All day she sits upon the stair or on top steps of the mat. She sits and sits and sits, and that's what makes a Gumby cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby cat's work is but hardly begun. And when all the family's in bed and asleep, she slips down the stairs to the basement to creep. She is deeply concerned with the ways of mice. Their behavior's not good, and their manners not nice. So when she has gotten them lined up in the matting, she teaches them music, crocheting, and tatting. I have a Gumby cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. Her equal would be hard to find. She likes the warm and sunny spots. All day she sits beside the hearth, or in the sun, or on my hat. She sits and sits and sits, and that's what makes a Gumby cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby cat's work is but hardly begun, as she finds that the mice will not ever keep quiet. She is sure it is due to an irregular diet, and believing that nothing is done without trying, she sets straight to work with her baking and frying. She makes them a mouse cake of bread and dried peas, and beautiful fry of lean bacon and cheese. I have a Gumby cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. This music's getting a bit too epic. I have a Gumby cat in mind. Her name is Jenny Anydots. The curtain cord she likes to wind and tie into sailor knots. She sits upon the window sill, or anything that's smooth and flat. She sits and sits and sits and sits, and that's what makes a Gumby cat. But when the day's hustle and bustle is done, then the Gumby cat's work is but hardly begun. She thinks that the cockroaches just need employment to prevent them from idle and wanton destroyment. So she's formed from that disorderly louts a troop of well-disciplined, helpful Boy Scouts, with a purpose in life and a good deed to do. She's even created a beetle's tattoo. So for all the Gumby cats, let us now give 3 cheers, on whom well-ordered household it depends, it appears. What do you think? Let's go back to this one. I did not write all of this. I'm reading from a book called Cats by T.S. Eliot. This is his collection of poems that inspired the 1994 stage play Cats, where you see these screenshots are from, or the recent Cats movie, unfortunately, which I will not be referencing. But it's based off these poems. which I have the book of, and I'm working through. Wow, that's something. I'm not done yet. There is 10. And it's not even all the poems. I just chose 10 to read because, ooh, spooky. People don't like cats. I don't understand why. And so I thought I'd do something spooky by reading cats. The Rum Tum Tugger. The Rum Tum Tugger is a curious cat. If you offer him pheasant, he would rather have grouse. If you put him in a house, he would rather much prefer a flat. If you put him in a flat, then he'd rather have a house. If you set him on a mouse, then he'd only want a rat. If you set him on a rat, then he'd rather chase a mouse. Yes, the Rum Tum Tugger is a curious cat, and there isn't any call for me to shout it. But he will do, as you do, and there's nothing to do anything about it. The Rum Tum Tugger is a terrible bore. When you let him in, then he wants to be out. He's always on the wrong side of every door, and as he's at home, then he'd like to get about. He likes to lie in the bureau drawer, and he makes such a fuss if you can't get out. Yes, the Rum Tum Tugger is a curious cat. It isn't any use for you to doubt it, but he will do, as you do, and there's no doing anything about it. The Rum Tum Tugger is a curious beast. His disobliging ways are a manner of habit. If you offer him fish, then he always wants a feast. And if there isn't any fish, then he won't eat a rabbit. If you offer him cream, then he sniffs and he sneers, for he only likes what he finds for himself. So you'll catch him in it right up to the ears, but if you put it away on the larder shelf. The Rum Tum Tugger is artful and knowing. The Rum Tum Tugger doesn't care for a cuddle, but he'll leap on your lap in the middle of your sewing, but there's nothing he enjoys like a horrible muddle. Yes, the Rum Tum Tugger is a curious cat, and there isn't any need for me to spout it, but he will do, as he do, and there's no doing anything about it. I have to find the next page, next chapter. Dude. Of the awful battle of the peaks and the pollicles. Together with some account of the participation of the pugs and the poms, and the intervention of the great Rumpus Cat. The peaks and the pollicles, everyone knows, are proud and implacable, passionate foes. It is always the same wherever one goes, and the pugs and the poms, although most people say that they do not like fighting, will often display every symptom of wanting to join in the fray, and they bark, 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 until you can hear them all over the park. Now, on the occasion of which I shall speak, almost nothing had happened for nearly a week, and that's a long time for a poll or a peak. The big police dog was away from his beat. I don't know the reason, but most people think he had slipped into the bricklayer's arms for a drink. And no one at all was about on the street when a peak and a pollicle happened to meet. They did not advance or exactly retreat, but they glared at each other and scraped their hind feet and started to bark, 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 until you could hear them all over the park. Now the pig, although people may say what they please, is not a British dog, but a heathen Chinese. And so all the pigs, when they heard the uproar, some came to the window, and some came to the door. There were surely a dozen, more likely a score, and together they started to grumble and wheeze in the huffry, snuffry heathen Chinese. But a terrible dim is what a pollicle likes, for your pollicle dog is a dour Yorkshire type, and his raw Scottish cousins are snappers and biters, and every dog jack of them notable fighters. And so they stepped out with the pipers in order, playing when the blue bonnets come over the border. Then the pugs and the poms held no longer aloof, but some from the balcony and some from the roof joined into the din with a bark, 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 until you can hear them all over the park. Now when these bold heroes together assembled, the traffic all stopped and the underground trembled, and some of the neighbors were so afraid that they started to ring up the fire brigade. And suddenly up from a small basement flat, why who should stalk out but the great Rumpus Cat? His eyes were like fireballs, fearfully blazing. He gave a great yaw, and his jaws were amazing. And when he looked out through the bars of the area, you never saw anything fiercer or hairier. And what with the glare of his eyes and his yawning, the peaks and the pollicles quickly took warning. He looked at the sky, and he gave a great leap, and they every last one of them scattered like sheep. And when the police dog returned to his beat, there wasn't a single one left on the street. Mr. Mistopheles. You ought to know Mr. Mistopheles, the original conjuring cat. There can be no doubt about that. Please listen to me and don't scoff. All his inventions are off his own bat. There's no such cat in all the metropolis. He holds all the patent monopolies for performing surprising illusions and creating eccentric confusions. And prestidigitation and at legerdemain, he'll defy examination and deceive you again. The greatest magicians have something to learn from Mr. Mistopheles' conjuring turn. Presto, away we go, and we'll all say, oh, well, I never was there ever a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles. He is quiet and small, and he is black. From his ears to the tip of his tail, he can creep through the tiniest crack. He can walk on the narrowest rail. He can pick any card from the pack. He is equally cunning with dice. He is always deceiving you into believing that he is only hunting for mice. He can play any trick with a cork or a spoon and a bit of fish paste. If you look for a knife or a fork and you think it's merely misplaced, you have seen it one moment and then it is gone, and you'll find it next week lying out on the lawn. And we'll say, oh, well, I never. Was there ever a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles? His manner is vague and aloof. You would think there was nobody shyer, but his voice has been heard on the roof when he was curled up by the fire, and he has sometimes been heard by the fire when he was about on the roof. At least we all heard somebody who purred, which is incontestable proof of his singular magical powers, and I have known the family to call him in from the garden for hours while he was asleep in the hall. And not long ago, this phenomenal cat produced 7 kittens right out of a hat. And we all said, oh, well, I never, did you ever, know a cat so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles. That was my favorite. I like Mistopheles. Mistopheles is my favorite poem and my favorite from the musicals and stuff. It's just so fun and so good to do. I do have to struggle not to sing the song while I'm reading the poem, and I have to try and just read the poem, not sing the song, because it's slightly different, but I'm struggling. Next is Macavity, the mystery cat. Macavity's a mystery cat. He's called the Hidden Paw, but he's a master criminal who can defy the law. He's the bafflement of Scotland Yard and the flying squad's despair, for when they reach the scene of a crime, Macavity is not there. Macavity, Macavity, there is no one like Macavity. He's broken every human law, he breaks the law of gravity. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare, and when you reach the scene of a crime, Macavity is not there. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, But when I tell you once and once again, McCavity's not there. McCavity is a ginger cat. He's very tall and thin. You would know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. His brow is deeply lined with thought. His head is highly domed. His coat is dusty from neglect. His whiskers are uncombed. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake, and when you think he's half asleep, he's always wide awake. McCavity, McCavity. There's no one like McCavity, for he's a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. You may meet him in a by-street, you may see him in the square, but when a crime's discovered, then McCavity's not there. He's outwardly respectable. They say he cheats at cards, and his footprints are not found in any file of Scotland Yards. And when the larder's looted, or the jewel case is rifled, or when the milk is missing, or another peak's been stifled, or the greenhouse glass is broken, and the trellis past repair, aye, there's no wonder of the thing. McCavity's not there. And when the Foreign Office find a treatise gone astray, or the Admiralty lose some plans and drawings by the way, then there may be a scrap of paper in the hall or on the stair, but it's useless to investigate. McCavity's not there. And when the loss has been disclosed, the Secret Service say, it must have been McCavity, but he's a mile away. You'll be sure to find him resting, or a licking of his thumbs, or engaged in doing complicated long division sums. McCavity, McCavity, there's no one like McCavity. There never was a cat of such deceitfulness and suavity. He always has an alibi, and one or two to spare. At whatever time the deed took place, McCavity wasn't there. And they say that all the cats whose wicked deeds are widely known. I might mention Mungo Jerry. I might mention Griddlebone, are nothing more than agents of the cat who all the time just controls their operations, the Napoleon of crime. McCavity, McCavity. Gus, the theatre cat. Gus is the cat at the theatre door. His name, as I ought to have told you before, is really Asparagus. That's just a fuss to pronounce, that we usually call him just Gus. His coat's very shabby, he's thin as a rake, and yet he suffers from palsy that makes his paw shake. Yet he was, in his youth, quite the smartest of cats, but no longer a terror to mice or to rats. For he isn't the cat that he was in his prime, though his name was quite famous, he says, in its time. And whenever he joins his friends at their club, which takes place at the back of the neighbouring pub, he loves to regale them, if someone else pays, with anecdotes drawn from his palmiest days. For he once was a star of the highest degree. He has acted with Irving, he has acted with Tree, and he likes to relate his success on the halls, where the gallery once gave him 7 cat calls. But his grandest creation, as he loves to tell, was Fire for a Fiddle, the fiend of the fell. I have played, so he says, every possible part, and I used to know 70 speeches by heart. I had extemporized backchat, I knew how to gag, I knew how to let the cat out of the bag. I knew how to act with my back and my tail. With an hour of rehearsal, I never could fail. I had a voice that would soften the hardest of hearts, whether I took the lead or in character parts. I have sat by the bedside of poor little Nell. When the curfew was rung, then I swung on the bell. In the pantomime season, I never fell flat, and I once understudied Dick Whittington's cat. But my grandest creation, as history will tell, was Fire for a Fiddle, the fiend of the fell. Then, if someone will give him a truthful grin, he will tell how he once played a part in East Lynne. At a Shakespeare performance he once walked on Pat, when some actor suggested the need for a cat. He once played a tiger, could do it again, with an Indian colonel pursued down a drain. And he thinks that he still can, much better than most, produce blood-curdling noises to bring on the ghost. And he once crossed the stage on a telegraph wire to rescue a child when a house was on fire. And he says, "Now these kittens, they do not get trained, as we did in the days when Victoria reigned. They never get drilled in regular troop, and they think they are smart just to jump through a hoop." And he'll say, as he scratches himself with his claws, "Well, the theatre's certainly not what it was. These modern productions are all very well, but there's nothing to equal, from what I hear tell, that moment of mystery when I made history as Fire for Fiddle, the Fiend of the Fell." Mustapha Jones, the Cat About Town. Mustapha Jones is not skin and bones. In fact, he is remarkably fat. He doesn't hold pubs, he has 8 or 9 clubs, for he is the St. James's Street Cat. He's the cat we all greet as he walks down the street, in his coat of fastidious black. No commonplace mouses have such well-cut trousers, or such an impeccable back. No house. In the whole of St. James, the smartest of names is the name of his Brummel of Cats, and we're all of us proud to be nodded or bowed to by Mustapha Jones in white spats. His visits are occasional to the senior educational, and it's against the rules for any one cat to belong to both that and the joint superior schools. For a similar reason, when the game is in season, he is found not at Fox's, but Blimp's. And he's frequently seen at the gay stage and screen, which is famous for winkles and shrimps. In the season of venison, he gives his benison to the pot hunter's succulent bones. And just before noon, not a moment too soon, to drop in for a drink at the Drones. When he's seen in a hurry, there's probably curry at the Siamese or the Glutton. If he looks full of gloom, then he's lunched at the Tomb on cabbage, rice pudding, and mutton. So, much in this way passes Mustapha's day. At one club or another he's found. It can cause no surprise that under our eyes he has grown unmistakably round. He's a 25-pounder, or I am a bounder, and he's putting on weight every day. But he's so well preserved because he's observed all his life a routine, so he'll say. And, to put it in rhyme, I shall last out my time, is the word for his stoutest of cats. It must and shall be spring in Pall Mall, while Mustapha Jones wears white spats. Kind of butchered that delivery, but whatever. The addressing of cats. You've heard of several kinds of cat, and my opinion now is that you should need no interpreter to understand their character. You now have learned enough to see that cats are much like you and me, and other people whom we find, possessed of various types of mind. For some are sane, and some are mad, and some are good, and some are bad, and some are better, some are worse, but all may be described in verse. You've seen them both at work and games, and learnt about their proper names, their habits, and their habitat. But how would you address a cat? So first your memory I'll jog and say a cat is not a dog. Now dogs pretend they like to fight. They often bark, more seldom bite. But yet a dog is on the whole what you would call a simple soul. Of course I'm not including peaks and such fantastic canine freaks. The usual dog about town is much inclined to play the clown, and far from showing too much pride, is frequently undignified. Is very easily taken in, just chuck him underneath the chin, or slap his back or shake his paw, and he will gambol and guffaw. He's such an easygoing lout, he'll answer any hail or shout. Again, I must remind you, a dog's a dog, a cat's a cat. With cats, some say one rule is true: don't speak until you are spoken to. Myself, I do not hold with that. I say you should address a cat, but always keep in mind that he resents familiarity. I bow, and taking off my hat, address him in this form: "Oh, cat!" But if he is the cat next door, whom I have often met before, and comes to see me in my flat, I greet him with an "Whoops, a cat?" I've heard them call him James Buzz James, but we've not got so far as names. Before a cat will condescend to treat you as a trusted friend, some little token of esteem is needed, like a dish of cream. And you might now and then supply some caviar or Strasbourg pie, some potted grouse or salmon paste. He's sure to have his personal taste. I know a cat who makes a habit of eating nothing else but rabbit, and when he's finished, licks his paws so as not to waste the onion sauce. A cat's entitled to expect these evidences of respect, and so in time you reach your aim and finally call him by his name. So this is this, and that is that, and there's how you address a cat. A Rhapsody on a Windy Night. 12 o'clock, along the reaches of the street, held in a lunar synthesis, whispering lunar incantations, dissolve the flaws of memory and all its clear relations. Its divisions and precisions, every street lamp that I pass beats like a fatalistic drum, and through the spaces of the dark, midnight shakes the memory, as madman shakes the dead grenadium. 1:30, the street lamp sputtered, the street lamp muttered, the street lamp said, "Regard that woman, who hesitates toward you in the light of the door, which opens on her like a grin. See the border of her dress is torn and stained with sand, and you see the corner of her eye twists like a crooked pin. The memory throws up high and dry a crowd of twisted things, a twisted branch upon the beach, eaten smooth and polished, as if the world gave up the secret of its skeleton, stiff and white, a broken spring in a factory yard. Rust that clings to the form that strength has left, hard and curled and ready to snap. 2:30, the street lamp said. Remark the cat which flattens itself in the gutter, slips out its tongue, and devours a morsel of rancid butter. So the hand of a child automatic slipped out and pocketed a toy that was running along the quay. I could see nothing behind that child's eye. I have seen eyes in the street. Trying to peer through lighted shutters, and a crab one afternoon in a pool. An old crab with barnacles on his back gripped the end of a stick which I held him. 3:30. The lamp sputtered. The lamp muttered in the dark. The lamp hummed down. Regard the moon, the Luna Nagada Akun Rukun. She winks a feeble eye. She smiles into corners. She smooths the hair of the grass. The moon has lost her memory. A washed out smallpox cracks her face. Her hand twists a paper rose that smells of dust and old cologne. She is alone with all the nocturnal smells that cross and cross across her brain. The reminiscence comes of sunless dried geraniums and dust in crevices, smells of chestnuts in the streets, and of female smells in shuttered rooms, and cigarettes in corridors, and cocktail smells in bars. The lamp said, 4 o'clock. Here is the number of the door. Memory. You have the key. The little lamp spreads a ring on the stair. Mount. The bed is open. The toothbrush hangs on the wall. You put your shoes on the door. Sleep. Prepare for life. The last twist of the knife. And that is it. That was Super Spooky Scary Thing. Rawr. Spooky in quotation marks, depending on who you ask and what they enjoy. It is generally not something people enjoy, but that was it. With that, it is getting late, and I'm going to run away now. Hope you enjoyed it all. Might do something similar again with things more people enjoy. I like doing that. That was kind of fun, reading and stuff. But yeah. Catch you guys later. I can't smack the table because the microphone is connected to the table and you hear that. But yeah, it was good. I think I did better than I usually do. I'll have to go back and listen to it. Whomst can I read? Bunny Devil, Myra, Colt. Gonna send you over to Chris. He's playing Sonic Adventures. Who is got a VTuber avatar for Sonic Adventures, so enjoy. He's doing partner push, so feel free to hang around and get some views in for him. I think it's not just views though, but I think it's anything helps. Catch you guys later. Bye bye.